is intensely modern and realistic in the individualizing of his characters, who were never types, to the extent even of some of Balzac's, but always sharply differentiated and particular human beings. More distinctively still does he represent the new fiction by his insight into the springs of social action. No modern novelist has ever gone nearer than Racine did in his tragedies to the sources of personal, of individual feeling, and some of the French novelists of the 18th century are still unsurpassed, save by Racine, in the last refinements of individual soul analysis. What was new in both Balzac and Stendhal was the fact of their viewing each character, first of all as a product of particular material and social conditions, as being thus or thus because of the calling he pursued or the house he lived in, Balzac, or the society he wanted to get into, Stendhal, or the acre of ground he coveted, or the powerful or fashionable personage he aped or envied, both Balzac and Stendhal. These novelists, with the solitary exception of Defoe when he wrote Moll Flanders, are the first to seem continuously aware that the bounds of a personality are not reproducible by a sharp black line, but that each of us flows imperceptibly into adjacent people and things. The characterization of all the novelists who preceded these two masters seems, in comparison, incomplete or immature. Even Richardson's seems so in the most penetrating pages of Clarissa Harlowe. Even Goethe's in that uncannily modern novel, The Elective Affinities, because in the case of these writers, the people so elaborately dissected are hung in the void, unvisualized and unconditioned, or almost, by the special outward circumstances of their lives. They are subtly analyzed abstractions of humanity, to whom only such things happen as might happen to almost anyone in any walk of life. The inevitable eternal human happenings. Since Balzac and Stendhal, fiction has reached out in many new directions and made all sorts of experiments, but it has never ceased to cultivate the ground they cleared for it, or gone back to the realm of abstractions. It is still, however, an art in the making, fluent and dirigible, and combining a past full enough for the deduction of certain general principles with a future rich in untried possibilities. 2. On the threshold of any theory of art, its exponent is sure to be asked, on what first assumption does your theory rest? And in fiction, as in every other art, the only answer seems to be that any theory must begin by assuming the need of selection. It seems curious that even now, and perhaps more than ever, one should have to explain and defend what is no more than the rule underlying the most artless verbal statement. No matter how restricted an incident one is trying to give an account of, it cannot but be fringed with details more and more remotely relevant, and beyond that with an outer mass of irrelevant facts which may crowd on the narrator simply because of some accidental propinquity in time or space. To choose between all this material is the first step toward coherent expression. A generation ago, this was so generally taken for granted that to state it would have seemed pedantic. In everyday intercourse, the principle survives in the injunction to stick to the point. But the novelist who applies or owns up to applying this rule to his art is nowadays accused of being absorbed in technique to the exclusion of the supposedly contrary element of human interest. Even now, the charge would hardly be worth taking up had it not lately helped to refurbish the old trick of the early French realists, that group of brilliant writers who invented the once famous tranche de vie, the exact photographic reproduction of a situation or an episode with all its sounds, smells, aspects realistically rendered, but with its deeper relevance and its suggestions of a larger whole either unconsciously missed or purposely left out. Now that half a century has elapsed, one sees that those among the